when your engine starts smoking like this, your first instinct may be to grab your trusty fire extinguisher. But my Audi wasn't even on fire. It was melting from the inside out. And when the shop told me it would cost $3,200 to fix a damaged coolant flange, and while they're at it, do a timing belt on my Audi, I thought they were insane. So I bought the parts for $356 to do it myself. And the plan was simple. Get the car towed to my grandpa's garage, rip apart the entire front end, find and fix the coolant leak at the source, and replace an old dying timing belt and water pump. But it turns out German engineering doesn't care about your plans. Because between fuel pumps being stuck pressurized, stripping bolts on coolant pipes, razor blades, super glued rubber, misaligned timing marks, and boiling coolant,
it's definitely too hot.
It's boiling in the tubes.
this might have became the worst $356 I ever spent.
I guess I gotta crank it now, huh? Are you ready?
Yep.
All right.
But before I was in an old van questioning my entire life, the Audi was just sitting outside my house leaking orange fluid. Day zero.
All right, so this is my Audi. It's currently stranded here outside my house. And it was leaking coolant for an entire year to the point where I was adding coolant every single time that I drove the car. And I noticed that it was coming from the rear of the engine. So I figured that it was the coolant flange. It's impossible to get to without taking shit off. So I took it to a shop to make them diagnose it for me. So I drop it off at the shop and they discover, yeah, it is the coolant flange. It actually looks like the entire thing's a little destroyed. And she pulls up the CARFAX. And she's like, oh, actually, it looks like you're due for a timing belt too. That's great. Yeah, it's been about 6 years and 70,000 miles since you did it last. Yeah, we really ought to do them at the same time. You can save some money. I know you're a student. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? That would be a good idea, do them both at the same time. So she finishes up the quote. At this point, it's about 5:30. All right, here we go. So it's looking to be about 3,200. 32? 32 what? 3,200 to do the flange and the timing belt.
What the hell?
The fuck? I didn't really react like that though. I mean, I said, appreciate you guys. Hope you have a great day. I'm gonna get back to you on that. So I walked out. Last time I ever saw him, and I was like, shit, I guess I gotta do it myself. So a few more weeks went by, you know, eventually I realized that the fate of the car was actually in my hands. So I went ahead and ordered the parts for the timing belt and the coolant flange. And that shit only cost me $356.43. So that's a difference of what, more than $2,800? I'd be a fucking idiot not to do it myself. Anyways, for a while, I had the parts sitting around the house. Nothing was like broken at the moment. So I wasn't worried about getting it fixed right now, but I was spending more on coolant than I was on gas. And then the car made the decision for me.
Oh shit.
So fast forward to this week. I'm on spring break. Last night, I took the car out, back roads. You know, I'm driving it. And finally, I'm headed home. It's dark out. You know, I'm cruising with the windows down. And I start smelling something a little sweet. But I'm thinking, that's not my car. That's somebody else's car. Even though there was nobody else's cars on the road. And I'm maybe 3 minutes away from the house at this point, so I'm not worried about it anyways. So I get to where I'm turning left here on our road, and then it happens, right? There's smoke coming out the hood, the coolant light is going off. I pulled over right here, and I start inspecting where's the smoke coming from. So I'm looking in there, I see, hey, you know what? Alternator's good, but it still smells sweet. And I notice the smoke is coming from the exhaust, and all of a sudden, shit ain't sweet anymore. So then I see my coolant temperature sensor dangling off to the side. And when you look at the actual coolant flange, it's a really shitty design. The temperature sensor holds in all the coolant and it's held in by literally a single clip, a plastic clip.
And what I think happened is it got too hot somehow and the clip broke, which made the sensor fall out, and all my coolant fell out with it, which would explain the sweet smelling smoke coming from the exhaust.
So I'm like, shit. Okay. And now here we are, it's Wednesday of spring break, and this is my ride back to school on Monday. Now my coolant flange and my timing belt kits, they already came in. So I've already got the shit to fix it. In fact, they're in the car right now. So now I've got the rest of my spring break to do the timing belt, coolant flange, and a few other little upgrades to make sure that nothing else goes wrong in the future And I've never done a job of this magnitude before. And I usually do all the work on my car in the yard over here, so I would have just rolled it in, but it's April, so we've got spring storms coming in the rest of spring break. And that's why we're here right now, because I'm waiting on the tow truck to come and tow my car to my grandpa's garage.
So I stood outside and I talked to myself a little while longer, and then finally the tow truck showed up. And I've got to say, they did an amazing job, although it was pretty easy because I told them that the car will crank and run briefly until it overheats, so you can totally drive it up there. It's no problem for me, and we were at the garage in no time.
I have not taken this car this far apart before. This entire front end is gonna have to come off.
And I know what you're thinking. Look at this guy. He's never touched a wrench in his life, but actually, I have in fact touched this vehicle in many places, and I have a little bit of experience. I mean, I've done all my oil changes, of course, because if you're a man and you don't change your own oil, you're a bitch. And I stand on that. So I've done spark plugs and coils a few times, the windshield washer pump, valve cover gaskets, painted it myself, picked up some chicks, thought about putting a backup camera. However, none of those things could possibly compare to the coolant flange job and the timing belt.
I should have tried that. I didn't think to try that. So.
But listen, with that $3,200 quote they gave me, like I said,
I'd be a fucking idiot not to do it myself.
anyways, it was very important that I got some sleep on the night of day 0 at least, so I went ahead and took some parts out the back of the car and I set them up on a table, and it was time to get some rest. Now, fortunately, I did not have to sleep in the garage because I just got the keys to something better.
But anyways, I'm running out of time here tonight, so I gotta go. And we've got heavy thunderstorms rolling in the morning. So tomorrow is when the real work begins. It's day 1. The storm hasn't quite hit yet, but the tornado sirens are going off. Damn. Okay, the bulk of the storm has passed, so it's time to prep the garage and get the car taken apart. Now the problem is I've got a 5-year-old dying battery, so it's time to make a trip to AutoZone. Pick up a battery. It's for a 2009 Audi A4. I think it's that one. Yeah. 259. Headed back to the garage. And the baby's strapped in, ready to go in case we hit any more inclement weather on the way there. All right, now that we're back in the garage, it's time to actually turn this place into the operation room. All right, so I got the car with the hood off. The car had some problems starting. So let's look at the voltage of this 5-year-old battery compared to the brand new one. All right, so now I'm gonna compare it to the new one. Let's see. Okay, so the old battery doesn't actually seem too bad. Now, it was a whole lot lower the other day, but it is 5 years old. But either way, this new one is a direct upgrade, so we're gonna go ahead and get that in there. All right, so got the new battery in. Now, we're gonna do the fuel stuff first. So we're gonna put the cam follower in, and I'm gonna put the fuel filter in. All right, at the passenger side, the fuel filter is at the back wheel. It's under here. So to get to it, I gotta jack it up. Yeah, but there's this cover here.
And I gotta be honest, look, I don't know why I bought this fuel filter. I guess I fell victim to ECS Tuning recommending me parts that I didn't need.
And then there's one more. I believe it's this.
But it's okay, because these extra upgrades, they didn't count at all towards my budget.
Now we can actually see our fuel filter there. So we'll have to get that bolt out and these lines off.
Okay, so I was watching YouTube and stuff to learn how to do this, and every person's video I saw, they did not have this crossbar here. And it turns out mine has the crossbar because it's the convertible version of the car. They had the sedan version. So I was gonna skip the whole thing, but I was able to get a little reach around going on and get the lines off.
Oh, I got it. It just came right off. Finally, got the fuel filter on there. It was impossible to take the things off. And I'm gonna prime it and make sure it starts.
All right, that's all we need to know.
Oh, okay, so the fuel filter is not leaking. And get the cover back on. Got that fuel filter done, and now it's time to do this little cam follower. I've done it before, so it shouldn't take me too long. This little thing is just basic maintenance, okay? It sits right inside the fuel pump right here. It rides the intake camshaft. So over time, they wear down, and this little top part gets worn out. And whenever it breaks and the middle metal pieces break off, they go inside your engine and they blow it up. So let's get it swapped out.
So I started with taking off this PCV hose on top here. And then I started taking off a couple electrical connectors from the high pressure fuel pump there. And then it was time to use this pressure relief valve to relieve the pressure inside of the high pressure fuel pump. So the goal here is just to take a pick or a screwdriver or something and press down that little Schrader valve there to relieve the pressurized gas from the system.
Why is there so much? It's just pouring out. Don't stop.
But it just kept on coming.
It's just pouring out.
So I tried taking a wrench and taking the whole thing off. But the gas just kept coming out.
All right, so I'm having a strange issue with this thing. So we've been messing with it for the past 2 hours, and there's still pressure in there somehow. I don't know how. I can't take this off because when I start to take it off, it starts to spray everywhere. And I can't just forego the step because there's a bolt right here that you can't get to.
And this was especially confusing to me because the last time I did it, when I relieved the pressure through that Schrader valve, it was like one little spray and then it was done. And then I could take the thing off. So unfortunately, that only left me with one choice.
All right, so for today, the cam follower replacement was a failure because it is infinitely pressurized. I don't know how that's even possible. Like, I'm serious. The gas just keeps coming out and I can't take off the thing. So it is what it is. I don't have to do the cam follower today. I don't have any more time to spare trying to mess with the fuel pump. So I've got 3 more days and I'm gonna get the timing belt and the coolant flange done. So I am gonna have to figure out the deal with the pressure on the fuel pump another time. It could be many things. I could just have to get another fuel pump. I don't know. So although today might have been slightly a failure, tomorrow I'm gonna come back better, stronger, and I'm gonna get started on getting the car into service mode. All right, it's day 2. Today I have a lot of stuff to do. And I know last night I said that I was gonna give up. But guess what? I'm not giving up, okay? Because I have another solution. So I put everything back together last night. I'm gonna find and pull the fuse for the fuel pump that comes from the back of the car. And then I'm gonna start the car, and then the car should stall out. And then at that point, there should be no more fuel in the high pressure fuel pump, okay? And if there still is, then there's some magic shit going on. I don't know. So, let's get right on it. All right, I found the fuses number 28. I believe it is this one right here, this little 20 amp. So that's our fuse. I'm gonna start it up and it should stall out. Okay, here we go. It's gonna run. It should die. It's not dying. The fuse is not in there. Hey, that's my coolant line. It should be dying. How is this possible? It should have already died by now. Oh, there we go. Finally, it died. That took a while. All right, so there's a lot of fuel in that line, apparently. I don't know how it lasted a whole 30 seconds. I know, that was like a minute. I'm gonna disconnect this battery, and then I'm gonna try to eject that fuel one more time. Okay, this is the moment of truth. This thing should only spray out a tiny bit. So if this thing comes off and it's just leaking fuel everywhere, then I know that something is wrong with this high pressure fuel pump. And there's some kind of check valve that is just draining all of my gas. It is off and there's no more gas leaking. All right, we got the little Schrader valve off and it is not leaking gas from here anymore. I don't think. Let me double check that. Is it dripping? I don't think so. Actually, it is dripping. We're just gonna try to get the thing off and see if it blows up.
Very nice. So the next step was to take off this bottom fuel line.
Is there fuel that's gonna come out of this?
So that was the main fuel line off. Now I just needed to take the screws out. And with the screws removed, I could now wiggle the fuel pump free. For the cam follower, is what sits inside. So I pulled out the old one, and I took a new one and applied oil to it and set it back in there. And if you look closely, you can see the back of my fucking head. So then I took this pick tool and I pulled off the old O-ring from the high pressure fuel pump, and I oiled up and applied this new O-ring. And then seated it back in there. Okay. Then I could finally put the screws back in. Yes, Papa John. I was plugging it back up as I tightened this rear fuel line again. And then I got our Schrader valve back on there, finally. No leaks. And tightened it. And then got our cap on. Then I finally started to put all of the other stuff back together. And I finished with getting my top PCV hose back on there. Alright, so this is the old cam follower. As you can see, it's got a little bit of wear. I mean, I had it on there for about 10,000 miles, I think. Now that the cam follower is finally done, I'm gonna start getting the car into the service position so that we can get that coolant flange and the timing belt done.
All right, now that we've got the bumper off, we start prepping for the coolant flange replacement.
And at this point, my knowledge of the coolant flange was from two sources. The first being the shop I went to, where they said they hated doing them, and it usually takes them a day and a half of work. And the second being online Audi forums where people referred to it as the dreaded coolant flange and say that a good mechanic will reserve about a day for this job. The rest of us will need at least 2. And with 2.5 days, that's plenty of fucking time to get the whole thing done. And don't forget the timing belt.
Like my shirt. It's pretty tough. So let's get started on that coolant flange.
As I started working on the coolant flange job, I realized there's a lot of stuff we gotta take out of the way first, starting with this coolant reservoir. Then we move to the back of the engine where our vacuum pump is, which needs to come off, but first we need to take off our vacuum hose and line back there.
It's right out.
And then I move the entire vacuum line that came from that out of the way. Then I move on to this N80 purge valve. And to be honest, I have no idea what it does, but it had to be moved out of the way. And with those out of the way, it was finally time to remove my first coolant pipe. So to start, I got that PCV hose out of my way again. Then I immediately got hungry, so I went out and got a sub. I was taking my leisurely time, and I thought getting the rest of this stuff off was gonna be a breeze.
Oh my God.
But as it got later into the night on Friday, the reality started to set in.
It's fucking stripped.
That this wasn't gonna be as simple as I thought it was gonna be.
How? It's made out of steel.
I literally stripped the first bolt that I touched on the coolant pipe. And to be fair, I mean, it kind of was my fault. But I deadass, I couldn't get the thing off. And I tried. I tried to get it off. I couldn't get it off.
It is 8:18 p.m. I've got 2 days. Like, I was kind of playing it for the video, but now I'm genuinely scared because I've got Saturday and Sunday. So all of tomorrow and Sunday, whichever German motherfucker decided to put a triple square right on top, surrounded by T30s that come off fine. Should have the death penalty. For sure.
But then, like an angel sent from heaven, Papa John was back.
Old-fashioned screwdriver.
Voila! I should have tried that. I didn't think to try that. So.
And although I didn't feel like the smartest mechanic in the world, I was a determined one. Even if you took all the gasoline I sprayed from that fuel pump and lit my ass on fire, I wasn't leaving that garage. I started with taking off the other 2 screws that were holding down the pipe. Then we needed to take off its 3 rubber hoses, 1 in the front, 2 in the rear. We started with the front, and it took a lot of prying. It was almost like it was glued on there. Then we moved on to the first rear one, and this one took even more prying with the screwdriver than the front, but we got it off.
Stuck together.
It's stuck. It's hard to get to.
Finally, we got to the last one, and this one just wouldn't come off. Then we realized, wait, we have the replacements. We can just cut them off. So for all the hoses I had replacements for, they were getting cut off.
I mean, this is basically stuck on there.
Wow.
That's why they're so hard to come off over time. The heat just welds that rubber to the pipe.
We got the top pipe off, but that was it.
All right, look. Day 2 was not as successful as I hoped. I may have lost today's battle, but I'm gonna win the war. And in order to win the war, day 3 and 4, I've gotta be on point. If I strip another bolt, I'm not making it back to school in my entire life. I'm gonna live as a hermit. The haircut, Barry. However, I do know that I am determined. I don't care if it takes me 30 trips to AutoZone. I'm getting this job done within the next 2 days. So, tomorrow, I'm getting all the coolant flange shit done. All of it. At the very least. And hopefully, I can start on the timing belt tomorrow. Maybe. But for the bare minimum, if I don't get those things done, then we're all gonna fucking die. So I'm gonna get some rest, and I'm gonna see you on day 3. We got the valve. I want to break that to here. This is one, right? So now the bag. All right, the vacuum start, air filter, tensioner. The plan for it to the front. This is oil that might make it. We're gonna replace it.
If you're excited, if you're jumping out of your seat and you're ready for part 2, hit that fucking subscribe button. And if it's out, click the link on the screen. Let's go.